afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us. Combine underway in Indianapolis next week, and we'll be there Tuesday and Wednesday. The shows will be live from Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. Well, Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson from PFF discussed the Deshaun Watson contract, 3 years left on it, a lot of guaranteed money.
I'm working under the basis that they have to roll with Deshaun Watson.
Yes. So they're now in this position where they have the worst of the contracts for the big money quarterbacks that are causing problems for every franchise that's got one. The contract is so bad that it is still seen as an undesirable outlier that the rest of the league simply chooses to ignore, right? Contracts come up, the next quarterback's done. Nobody is using that as precedent. I don't know if that's ever happened before, where a quarterback deal has been done and the entire league just chooses to ignore it as, actually, that didn't set precedent. The one you want to be looking at is Joe Burrow or Herbert or whatever. We're simply ignoring the Deshaun Watson deal. That's seen as the crazy outcome of the desperate franchise that we simply choose to pretend didn't exist. But it means that it's causing Cleveland more problems than any other franchise who has to deal with this.
With that, let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, it's kind of interesting. Andrew Berry was asked, when they did that contract a couple of years ago, if he thought it would be something that set the benchmark, and he said he really didn't think it would be. They haven't not been able to make any moves in free agency. There's this narrative that it's hamstrung them, but they continue to say, we have a plan, we can make any moves in free agency that they want. And they've been active in free agency. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is. At some point in time, it may come back to be a bad contract. It's not a great contract, but right now it's not keeping them from doing anything.
Yeah, it's just a contract. I don't get the hysteria around it. Like you said, it hasn't really prevented the Browns from being able to make any moves. They were still able to bring in Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Obo Okoronkwo. They brought in on long-term deals. So they've been able to maneuver that. They haven't had to cut a notable player because of the salary cap. It's actually been the opposite, where they've been able to extend Grant Delpit. They're probably going to work on getting JOK extended. They've extended numerous players, Denzel Ward, since the Watson contract. So when people bring this up, I challenge them to provide evidence on how this contract has actually made the Cleveland Browns a worse team. All of this is kind of hypothetical when we talk about Deshaun's contract. We think it's going to have this effect, or they feel like it should have an effect, but we're not actually talking about what the effect has been on the team, which has been, it's a normal quarterback contract. You got to maneuver around it. Yeah, you got to do some restructures, kick some money down the can. But it's really what every other team does. And to the point that they tried to make at the beginning of this video, well, this contract is so bad that nobody else is trying to replicate it. Is that really the bar of success? And is that even true? Because Kyler Murray got $230 million $235 million in his contract. So the total money definitely factored in to his contract. And then you see guys like Joe Burrow get 220 guaranteed. Somebody's eventually going to break the 230 number. And also another thing to note, teams realize that whether you give the money fully guaranteed or not, the money is essentially fully guaranteed. Deshaun Watson was able to get his contract fully guaranteed by law because of the situation he was in. He was basically a free agent. None of these quarterbacks that they have mentioned that would have took precedent from him were free agents, right? That's also a big factor in it. We didn't say this stuff about Kirk Cousins when he signed his fully guaranteed deal, and it took all the way until Deshaun Watson to get another guaranteed deal in the NFL. We didn't say, it's such a bad contract and nobody replicated it. No, we understood the leverage that Kirk Cousins had in that moment because he was essentially a free agent, the same as Deshaun Watson. And the precedent is set. If a big-time quarterback hits some level of free agency and has that level of barter, they're probably going to get something like that. So I don't get the hysteria around the contract. The Browns weren't the first to fully guarantee a quarterback contract, and they're not going to be the last to fully guarantee a quarterback contract.
And you know, the flip side of it is they're able to do any moves they want to make. So again, much ado about nothing with that. All right, this from Browns Wire. Grading Browns quarterbacks from the 2023 season. For Deshaun Watson, they give him a C-. Overall, his season was below average, but incredibly inconsistent. Play varied greatly from jaw-dropping improvisation to headache-inducing decision-making. Watson needs to become a better decision-maker next season. Led to the majority of the underwhelming play this year. I wouldn't necessarily argue that he played outstanding. You know, the record, and I get it. Record is not a quarterback metric necessarily. They're winning games with him at quarterback. The last time we saw him on the field against Baltimore was what we expected from a franchise quarterback. Titans game was good. If you want to tell me his mechanics struggled in some games, I'd listen to that. But you know, overall, incomplete is what I would grade him because, you know, he didn't play enough games.
Yeah, I don't think like a C grade for him is unfair, but I don't love how the writer got there, in my opinion. I don't think Deshaun Watson was very up and down at all. I thought that he was pretty like consistently pretty good, but like not like what you wanted Deshaun Watson to be, right? He had those times where he made some good throws, but all in all, the numbers were kind of underwhelming for a guy that we saw kind of routinely get to 300 yards in Houston. So I would say, like, to me, Deshaun Watson was somebody who, you know, he played at a above to below to average level. Most of the time he was out there, but that's not what you expected. I don't know if he was as inconsistent as this writer is indicating. I thought that this was a better description for Joe Flacco, if I'm being honest, where Joe Flacco kind of had these great moments of jaw-dropping improvisation during the season and also had those headache-inducing interceptions that he had. So I don't know. I think the book's all over the place with how people feel like Deshaun Watson played. I think Deshaun Watson, you know, he managed the games well enough when he was out there, and the point differential with him out there, I think, is significant, right? Plus 63, and that's not just because the defenses were magically playing better while Deshaun was out there. It's because Deshaun was doing a good job managing the game, not turning the ball over as much as other quarterbacks were for the Cleveland Browns, and kind of maintaining those leads and then building on top of it. Deshaun had like 2 games this year. In 5 games that he finished 5 games. 2 of those games, he sat out the fourth quarter because it was a blowout. Like, this team was really rolling with him at quarterback. And I think it's obvious that he was definitely a part of that. Was he the main part of that? No, it was this defense. But this defense was playing at a generational level. So it's kind of hard to be mad at him for not being the main reason, but he was still a very big factor in why this team was able to look as good as they did. And the longer we get away from it, Dave, the easier it is to forget. We thought that this team was a serious Super Bowl contender to a man after that Baltimore game. To a man. And it's like the further that has gone, the more we've forgotten that that's where we were the last time we saw him play quarterback. And that's not to suggest that he's going to win the MVP this year, but we can't act like he's like a lost cause because the play's been that bad when it really hasn't.
All right, another national narrative that seems to be going around. The Browns could possibly cut Nick Chubb for salary cap purposes. Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter, as plugged in as anybody. No plans at all. In fact, she said, not going to happen. And that's not a surprise, Quincy. I mean, this front office doesn't roll that way. He's probably going to get less money with incentives that can get his money back. But I would be stunned if Nick Chubb, if his agent and the Browns front office can't come to some agreement relative to that contract and adding years onto it that's agreeable to both sides.
Nick Chubb does not want to hit free agency at 29 years old coming off of a major knee injury. The Browns don't want to cut Nick Chubb because they're going into a must-win season, and Nick Chubb, when he's healthy, is one of your best players. And cutting one of your best players does not send the greatest message to a locker room that really rallied around Nick Chubb. They're both not in a position to get rid of each other, and the benefit that either side will get from this, which Nick Chubb might get a couple extra $1 million a year, and the Browns might save a couple extra $1 million from cutting him. It's just not enough to make that a reality. No team, no party, no side of this wants Nick Chubb to be in any other uniform other than brown and orange, and they have strong incentives to make sure that doesn't happen. So this is just something that, we throw out there. It's the week after the Super Bowl. We're trying to find stuff to talk about, but I thought it was a non-story to start.
All right, this is kind of concerning. This is the percentage of running back runs that did not gain yards. This is from Warren Sharp, Sharp Football. Top is the Jaguars at 25%, tied for second. Browns, Jets, Cardinals, Giants. Those are not running games you really want to be associated with, and kind of further illustrates, boy, it'd be nice to have Nick Chubb back. You were nowhere near that when you had Nick Chubb running the football.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people get wrong when they talk about Nick Chubb as a running back, right? And they kind of like use it as kind of a decorative term to him. It's like, oh, he's a running back and he's 29. He's not a running back. He is Nick Chubb. And what that means is that he is going to be treated differently than the rest of his peers because he is elite at his position. Once you are elite at your position, all the conventional wisdom about what you should do with the cap number at this position goes out the window, right? If you're an elite kicker, you probably get a lot more money and a lot more leeway than a regular kicker does. That's the same thing for a running back. Nick Chubb is an elite running back. Nick Chubb's also somebody that we saw while playing major football have a knee injury that was similarly gruesome and come back and played his best football after that. So I don't think the reasonable assumption is that Nick Chubb's just going to turn into dust and stink. So he's still going to be held in that caliber. And because of that, and because of what we saw with this run game after Nick Chubb went out, the Browns, again, they're at a win now season. And not having Nick Chubb and going back to those numbers, that's not something that they want to have happen.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little receiver. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay.
Here comes the rush.
All right, everybody, let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $10 Lady Luck 50X. It's got prizes all the way up to $500 grand, so you could really clean up.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're an easy way to cook up some fun.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hello, big Browns fan here. I just want to know y'all's opinion on a wide receiver 2 for the next Browns season. The names that come to mind are T. Higgins, Mike Williams, KJ Osborne, DJ Chark, Calvin Ridley, and lots of others. I was wondering what y'all's guys' best fit for the Browns at wide receiver 2 or possibly 1 would be. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, as always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, that's an interesting list. T. Higgins, I don't think is realistic. They're going to franchise him and probably franchise tag him, probably trade him because they can't afford him. Who do you like to pair up for the Browns at wide receiver?
Yeah, you want to look at skill set here, right? Like, what skill set at wide receiver do the Browns not have, right? We have an elite route runner in Amari Cooper. We have somebody who's also a pretty good route runner, but a little bit more of an explosive athlete at a smaller size in Elijah Moore. And then you have, your drafted guys, right? Cedric Tillman is a bigger guy, but hasn't really caught on yet. Still has some issues he needs to work out to get on the field more. David Bell's kind of in a similar vein to Amari Cooper, a little bit lesser of an athlete. So you look at that group and you think to yourself, man, Mike Williams is one of those guys we don't have. right? A big play guy, a big guy, a 50-50 ball guy, and a guy that has a ton of experience with Deshaun Watson. That's why I would lean towards. Unfortunately, he has a ton of injury history, and that's probably why he's going to be made available and affordable for the Cleveland Browns. But I think that that's somebody that not only you can go after and they would fit on this roster, but you could feel good about your chances to get him because you could have Deshaun Watson recruit him if he becomes available, and that will give you a good chance to bring him in under a reasonable number. So of those guys, I think Mike Williams makes the most sense. To me, Calvin Ridley, kind of redundant with what you got going on with Elijah Moore. Same thing with DJ Shark. Mike Williams is really the one that brings something different to the table of all those guys listed.
All right, this is kind of interesting as well. So this is the list of the most expensive wide receivers, so top contracts. Now, what's interesting about this, and I was surprised when I found this out, none of these players were acquired via free agency, and none have actually ever hit the open market during their career. Half of them, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore, acquired via trade the same way the Browns acquired Amari Cooper. So I guess what I'm getting at, signing a free agent wide receiver, not an easy thing. They are usually overpaid for, and there's usually a high demand because it's a passing league.
We need to have a real conversation about, like, is it really a good idea to pay a wide receiver 28, 29, $30 million? Because also another thing that you saw on that list, you didn't see one contender on that list next to the team name of the wide receiver. I mean, even Philly, who's supposed to be a contender, they got bounced in the first round, and it wasn't something that shocked us, right? So I don't know how much it's really worth to go after all of these wide receivers. Yes, you want to have some. I know this 49ers would be a good argument for having some wide receivers. You definitely want to have at least one wide receiver. But when you start talking about, you know, these guys who are getting these mega contracts, Stephon Diggs been on the Bills forever, and they still ain't been able to do nothing about Pat Mahomes, when Pat Mahomes has had Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling as his answer to that. So I don't know. Like, I think there's a reckoning to happen with the wide receiver position. I think it's kind of become a little overvalued. And the fact that none of these guys has hit the open market and they're still this expensive. And then you look at some of the wide receivers that did get open market money, like Kenny Galladay did. And it's not normally a good idea, right? You're going to have to overpay for these wide receivers. And then these wide receivers, you know, if they're available, usually they're not the ones that you actually want. And even a T. Higgins, right? If he's going to get a contract like this, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to have to trade for him and give him the contract that he wants. So it just doesn't make too much sense to me right now to spend giant money at a wide receiver.
So this NFL's highest graded receivers from 2023 PFF. Number 20, Amari Cooper, a guy the Browns traded for. So Andrew Berry kind of up on the trends like that. So, you know, that's keep an eye on a potential trade as well. So you see 265-yard day against the Texans, boosted Cooper's season. Even without it, would have still racked up over 1,000 yards, averaged 2.21 yards per route run. This year, second best of his career, the best since his 2019 season with the Cowboys. So again, that's keep your Andrew Berry is aware of all of these little things that we talk about and is usually at the front edge of them. But again, Amari Cooper, you gave up a 5th-round pick. You had to pay him, but you gave up a 5th-round pick.
Don't you love it when people write like, "Hey man, he had 265 yards in a game, but despite that, like he didn't earn the 265 yards and he just magically got 265 yards in a game. Like it's almost a bad thing because he got 265 yards in a game. That we got to kind of discount it, right? Like I love when that happens, as if like that yardage would have meant more if it were spread out during like 7 different games. But yeah, Amari Cooper's been really good. When he's had consistent quarterback play, he's been great. He was great when Deshaun Watson was out there consistently. He was great with PJ Walker. Okay, he was great with Joe Flacco. He has a very versatile style. And also one of the things that's underrated about Amari Cooper that I feel like the coaching staff and the people in the locker room go out their way to highlight is he is smart. Like, they talk about him like a football genius behind the scenes, and he's able to figure out stuff and ways to work with different quarterbacks. And I think if him and Deshaun get a whole season together, I think he could put together another career year, because the chemistry with him and Deshaun was there when Deshaun was healthy. They just didn't get that many games left. Remember, they were drawing up plays on the sideline. The chemistry was so strong.
All right. So this potential cap casualties who could have the biggest impact on the free agent market. This is from the Bleacher Report. And they go with a couple of Chargers here. Khalil Mack, second season with the Chargers. Mack turned back the clock, amassed a career high 17 sacks, posted second most tackles for loss, 21 of his career. And then Mike Williams. We've talked about him earlier, missed more games over the past 2 seasons than he's played. He tore his ACL in week 3 this year rather. Still won't turn 30 until October and has a pair of 1,000-yard seasons on his professional resume. Has the size and skill set to serve as a number 1 wide receiver. And Quincy, I'm with you. I think the injuries, they're a concern. They're always a concern. But that's going to drive his price down. And this is like a classic take a shot on a 1-year deal. And you know, it's a quarterback that he played in college with in Deshaun Watson in an offense that's going to be set up to highlight him.
Mike Williams has always been a productive receiver too, right? College, NFL, he's always been productive. The one thing that I think people always get wrong about him is that they see his size, they see his ability to separate, they see his athleticism, and they think to themselves, number 1 receiver. When I don't think Mike Williams is at his best when you have him as your number 1 option. What he is your favorite special move in a video game, right? Like, you can hit that Mike Williams special move 5-6 times in a game. But when it's when it's 3rd and 10, you're not throwing to Mike Williams, right? Like, that's not the situation. You want to get the ball to Keenan Allen. And in the Browns case, they have the infrastructure to make Mike Williams work, where we could just plug him in. He don't got to be Keenan Allen. We don't need him to be the number 1 receiver. We got Amari Cooper for all of that stuff, right? Getting up and down the field. What we do need you to do is hit those special moves during the game and get some big plays for the Cleveland Browns and have that chemistry with Deshaun if he does have to break the pocket. So, yeah, I think Mike Williams is probably one of those guys at the top of the list for the Browns, because it just makes sense. They need a bigger receiver. They need to get some size there. They don't need a number 1 receiver, but they do need another body at the receiver position, another productive veteran body there, and that makes a ton of sense. By the way, buyer beware of Khalil Mack. I don't know about that one. I know somebody going to pay him, and they're going to give him that Von Miller Buffalo money, but I wouldn't want to be me.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out of the side of the break. We'll talk a little bit about the offensive line. What do the Browns do there? Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, PFF NFL show. Talking a little bit about the Browns offensive line, what they should do.
Jedrick Wills has not developed as a former first-round left tackle. That's been the one weakness.
I would immediately
on their line.
Dawgland Jones should be starting for them, whether it's right or left tackle. They need to find a way of getting him in the starting lineup, and if that's benching and or getting rid of Jedrick Wills, cool.
The problem is Jack Conklin and Dawgland Jones have both been right tackles over the last several years.
And Conklin is probably on his last year there, so, you know.
But it would be... The chat's asking about trading Conklin. It's not the best move from a cap standpoint yet, but again, if you're trying to think about next year's cap situation and everything, it might be in play, especially if you have Dawgland Jones who could step in.
Yeah, it would just... Given what we saw from Dawgland Jones, it would be brutal to waste a year of his putting him back on the bench just because, you know, Jack Conklin comes back and you can't get rid of him yet.
Quincy, the other thing is, they mentioned neither one of them played left tackle. Remember, Jedrick Wills was a right tackle in college as well. He moved to left tackle.
Yeah, Jedrick Wills was a blindside protector, though. Like that's another big distinction in there, right? When you look at these guys, he was a blindside protector for Tua. So even at right tackle, some of that technique's going to be a little bit different than what a regular right tackle would do when you can assume that there's going to be some level of eyesight, right? You're going to be told to make guys run the arc more. You're going to be told the importance of not getting beat inside. Like, it's just a little bit different there with his right tackle experience and why it was more applicable to flip him to the left side when he got to the NFL, assuming that you had a right-handed quarterback. But yeah, the Browns are in an interesting spot. They have two all-rookie tackle and an all-pro tackle on the right side. And then they have a question mark with Jed Wills at the left side. And you could trade Jed. There's a question of, like, is there going to be enough interest in Jed to be able to trade him and all of that other stuff? But they do need to figure out something. I think that's going to be one of the most intriguing things to figure out all summer. And it's basically a good problem because you got lucky in the draft and got a really good right tackle, but he was so good so early that it kind of blew up your plans, and you don't have that contract with Jack Conklin in a way to get rid of right now. And you couldn't anticipate that 32 teams will let DeJuan Jones pass by 3 times when you gave Jack Conklin that extension. So it's like, oh, well, I guess we got to figure it out.
The other thing is maybe Andy Dickerson can come in and it'll be a different offensive line coach. And, again, Bill Callahan's arguably one of the best of all time. But maybe a different voice helps Jed Wills figure something out.
Yeah, even great coaches don't get through to everybody. Right, like that's fair. Like the best coaches of all time sometimes struggle to get through to certain types of things because it might be a pet peeve or a blind spot of theirs. So maybe that's something that could happen for Jed Wills. And also you got to ask yourself, how feasible is it for DeJuan Jones to flip and play the left side? I know people are going to tell me he played the left side during the pandemic season at Ohio State. But playing football during the pandemic season of college football, remember, 12 teams playing? And maybe, half of those teams had their players actually playing during those games? That's very different than going up against these dudes in the AFC North, right? Going up against Trey Hendrickson, going up against Kyle Hamilton when he lines up on that left side for Baltimore as a special blitzer, and going up against Alex Highsmith, who's proven to be dangerous at that spot. It's a little bit of a different game there. So, and you also got to ask the question, okay, yeah, you do flip DeJuan to left. The bigger question to me is, okay, let's say DeJuan works out. He works out at left. Do you trust Jack Conklin to stay healthy? And if you don't trust Jack Conklin to stay healthy, what do you have behind him? And do you just end up in a situation where you end up spending the money you would save trading Jed Wills to make sure that you don't get a disaster situation if the very likely scenario pops up that Jack Conklin does not stay healthy?
Well, here's the other thing, though. You have a quarterback who's coming off of a significant shoulder injury and a significant throwing injury to his rotator cuff. You better protect his blind side. You've got a $230 million guaranteed invested in that guy, and you better block for him.
And there's a serious question of, hey, if DeJuan Jones was that good at right tackle, could he be an upgrade at left tackle? That's the upside of this all, because if you move Jed and you do those stuff, it's because you're betting on the upside of DeJuan Jones being able to play that left side just as good as he played the right side, because he destroyed TJ Watt when he played on that right side. And if we could have that on Deshaun's blind side with the athletic ability that DeJuan has, oh, wow, you can see why people would get excited about this. But it's a real question of if a dude that big, that used to playing the right side, can flip to the left side, especially after he's come back from injury.
All right, so David Njoku, he really played well, although it was mostly with Joe Flacco. Take a look at his numbers relative to tight ends. 5th in catches, 88. 5th in touchdowns with 6. 4th in receiving yards, almost 1,000. 1st in yard after catch. 1st in missed tackles forced. So, Quincy, what did you think of Njoku's year, and what is the type of year he have? What's it do for you?
Yeah, man. And Njoku has had the year that we've been dreaming of him having since, check this, 2017. Yeah. That's how long David Njoku, you don't think about this. David Njoku was on that Browns team that went winless. That's crazy to think about, right? David Njoku and Myles Garrett were both on that Browns team that went winless. But yeah, like this is the season we've been hoping David Njoku could have, for the longest time, close to 1,000 yards, a lethal threat. It took a long time to get there. To get to your question about how does that development affect the Browns going forward, is David Njoku was the Browns' first real crisis that they had to deal with. Because remember, Andrew Berry and Kevin both got here, and David requested a trade because they brought in Harrison Bryant and they brought in Austin Hooper. And, they could have handled this the way that we've seen plenty of Browns regimes handle this, where they're like, no, we're going to trade you because you won't want to be here. We're going to get rid of you. We're going to go short term on this, right? And then David Njoku would have popped up probably in Kansas City, and we would have been furious, right? He's a Super Bowl champion. He's done this. We've been furious about this. But they went a different route. They said, okay, no, we're not going to trade you. We're actually going to keep you here. We're going to play out your whole rookie deal. And then once your rookie deal's up, okay, you showed some improvement. We're going to extend you. And then once we extended you, we're going to use you more and then more and more. And then you get this season to happen where he was putting up good numbers at the beginning of the season. Obviously, every receiver on this team had a lull after that second Deshaun Watson injury, right? It just went flat. DTR was a rookie. PJ Walker was not playing his best football, and then Joe Flacco came in and those numbers went back up. So, yeah, I think David has been who we've wanted David to be and more because, look, we didn't think he would be this good of a blocker coming out. We thought he would be a 50-50 ball guy coming out of Miami, which he hasn't really been in the NFL, but you know what he has been? A yards after catch monster, which I don't think we predicted. Like, David Njoku is what we want him to be, but he did not get there the way that we thought he would get there, and he did not get there with the skill set that we thought he would have getting there. But he got there, and that's what's most important because now the Browns have one of the best tight ends in all of football, and that's a dangerous thing to have.
Yeah, and it, the other thing is that it tells you with younger players, he's 20, 21, give them some time. And they gave him some time, and they're being rewarded for it now. Quincy, Carey, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, talk a little bit about the defense. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, Browns defense was really good, but it wasn't great on the road. How do you think they fix that?
Well, it's interesting, right? When you see those graphics, the Browns gave up 29.6 points a game on the road. They were the worst team in football on the road. And I don't know about you. I see that. I'm like, they definitely weren't the worst defense in the NFL. They were definitely not as good as they were at home, but they weren't the worst defense in the NFL. So you start doing some digging, and you start to realize that some of these points aren't on the defense that are accounted with it, right? We have all 31 of those points versus Cincinnati that last game where the Browns basically just didn't play their starters. That was a road game. That's 31 points. You got 17 points straight up off a turnover in a road game versus Pittsburgh. You have 14 points in Baltimore. Remember the pick six at the beginning of the game and then the James Prochet muff punt, which led to 7 points the other direction. You had them 2 touchdowns in Houston when they pulled the starters. You had a game in L.A. where Joe Flacco threw a pick six or near pick six, and then also took a safety. That's 9 points right there. And then you have a game in Denver where the Browns gave up 10 points off of turnovers after DTR went out for the game and PJ Walker came in there. And then obviously the 14 points off pick sixes against Houston. And you take those points out, and the Browns are at 20.28 points a game, which would actually put them 7th best in the NFL. So the Browns weren't as good on the road as they were at home. Were they as bad as people make it out to be? I don't think so. What has to get different is that they have to be pass rush aggressive proof, right? I think they need 1 or 2 bodies in the inside that can rush the passer well. I think Maurice Hurst is definitely somebody who should come back. Shelby Harris is somebody who should come back. And you should look at a DJ Reader or another, like a Larry Ogunjobi would actually fit well here if he would want to come back. Somebody who can win one-on-ones, because that's when the Browns defense got exposed a little bit, right? When they were able to isolate Myles Garrett with 2 or 3 blockers and then force them into one-on-ones, and the Browns couldn't win those one-on-ones. That's where you were allowed to kind of take advantage of the aggressiveness of the Cleveland Browns, and that's something that I think kind of hurt them in the short term for them.
All right, so we're going to look at some edge rushers, potential landing spots, top free agent edge rushers. This is from Pro Football Focus. So they list Zadarius Smith at number 42. They say the potential landing spots, the Lions and the Texans, which would be interesting. The other one that they mentioned, Danico Autry. So Autry ranked 84th, the Titans. There is a connection between Autry and Jim Schwartz as well. Potential landing spots, Browns and Giants. If the Browns were to hypothetically lose Zadarius Smith, they add a versatile defensive lineman who can line up as a 5 technique and kick outside and rush from between the tackles as well. So it's a similar skill set to what they had with Zadarius Smith. I'm not sure they're going to lose Zadarius Smith, but I could see somebody giving him a lot of money.
Yeah, and if they Zadarius Smith is interesting because he's about 30, didn't come off of a great year pass rushing wise. He might not be able to get the money he wants in free agency, so he might come back on a 1-year deal at $6-7 million. But also I think Alex Wright is somebody that this Browns team really likes and thought made some steps during the season. And I'm not 100% sure that the Browns are just going to write him off as far as starting, or don't feel comfortable with him starting in that position if it comes down to it. So Alex Wright is also somebody to look for if they do lose Zadarius Smith. I think they feel fine with Alex Wright stepping in there and being the guy that they could play as that power end over there, with Obo Okoronkwo getting a bigger role as kind of the primary edge there too.
Yeah, what do you think about Autry? It's an intriguing name. If it fits into, their structure, I could see that being a guy they look at.
Yeah, definitely Autry, somebody that they could look at. It's going to be a cost-benefit analysis thing. Like, okay, we don't want this dude to necessarily start. We're kind of opening those roles up. Or they got to ask themselves, hey, do we want to bet on the development of these two guys that we feel like really did start to show something, and say more snaps for Alex Wright and Obo Okoronkwo would be better than throwing an aging veteran in there.
All right. Who do you think gets extended soon? There's a couple of guys that are intriguing. Who do you think the Browns are looking to extend?
JOK got to get extended soon, right? They put him in a position, I think, not Greg Williams, Jim Schwartz did him a favor by making him the Mike linebacker towards the end of the season, which means his money's going to be different, right? He's not a role player. You're going to see Pat Queen kind of run into these issues where they were willing to pay Roquan Smith all of this money, but they're not going to be willing to pay you that same amount of money. This is going to be different for Jay. Okay, he's going to be the only linebacker getting paid, and he's going to be the guy that they're going to give the green dot to next year. He's going to be calling plays, kind of in charge of stuff. And I think he's probably going to be, going forward, their main ingredient to trying to free up Myles Garrett, moving him around and using his instinctive ability and his natural chemistry with Myles Garrett to kind of blow up some protection plans that they try with Myles. So yeah, I think You look at JOK as somebody who's going to get extended soon. If we're talking about off the field, I think this is as obvious as it comes, right? Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski probably very likely for extensions. I wouldn't be shocked if we heard about it within the next few weeks.
The other one would be Emerson, and keep in mind Emerson doesn't have that fifth-year option because he's played like a first-round pick, but he was a third-round pick. So you got to figure out. I mean, he's playing. He's probably a Pro Bowler next year if he continues along the track that he is, because he finally is getting some looks and some recognition, and that's kind of the way young guys go.
He should have been a Pro Bowler this year, right? Greg Newsome is a good player. Like, I want to emphasize this. Greg Newsome is a good player. Martin Emerson has been better than him. Like, that's why Greg is stuck playing the slot, because Martin has to be on the field at that boundary corner position. And Greg can go somewhere else, probably when his rookie deal's up, and he'll start, and he'll be a good player for whatever team he goes to. But that's how good Martin's been. So, yeah, Martin's going to be in that conversation as well. He was drafted 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So you have, at least another year before you have to worry about extending him. But yeah, I mean, we start talking about tenders and all of that. Like, he's going to get his money, right? Like, it's going to happen for him. He's probably going to get it in Cleveland.
Well, and the other thing that you do is you try to extend him a year early so you don't get, if he goes back-to-back Pro Bowl years, you want to have that in place before he outplays the worth of his contract.
Absolutely. You also have things that protect you as a team, right? So you have more control over a player you drafted. So they could do if it gets to that point, you might have to think about maybe working out a franchise tag and then trying to work out money in the long term, or pushing it down a year until you get free of some of Deshaun's thing, or maybe Deshaun gets to a point to where he gets an extension, which will free up more money in the future. But yeah, the Browns have a lot of different avenues they can go and play to, but I'm sure that they'll open every faucet they need to get Martin Emerson paid. And the good thing about the Browns ownership is that Jimmy Haslam has not been shy about being willing to spend that money to keep Cleveland Browns. Look how many guys they've re-signed over the last 4 years. I mean, it blows my mind as somebody who grew up watching the 2000 Browns to now, how many of their players that they keep, because it used to be the whole battle of, yeah, he's good, we ain't keeping him. We just knew we weren't keeping Alex back. We weren't keeping Mitchell Schwartz. We knew once those deals were up, they're gone, dog. They're gone. But it's a different world now that the Browns live in, where we are able to keep these guys. And I think they'll be able to do the same with Martin.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you, Dave.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Always really good Browns stuff. Untitled, unfiltered, watch his show. Really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
All right, everybody. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $5 25X. It's a nice way to nab up to 150 grand.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to $20. They're an easy way to break into some fun.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. This from NFL.com. Every team's wide receiver situation ahead of free agency and the draft. So the Browns, they say key free agents, Marquise Goodwin, Jakeem Grant, James Prochet. Browns finding a more productive version of Goodwin would open things up for more in the slot, take advantage of the attention on Cooper on the other side. Browns might not be in great cap situation, but putting out feelers on Gabe Davis, Marquise Brown fit the need. Andrew Berry could also see what sort of cost it would take to pry the likes of Courtland Sutton from the Denver Broncos. Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast. Jackson, the cap space thing, everybody seems to think that nationally, locally. We've already heard Andrew Berry say they have a plan and they know what they're going to do to get where they need to be. Gabe Davis, Marquise Goodwin, Courtland Sutton, someone else. Who do you like the sounds of?
Gabe Davis has been the one that I've been really paying close attention to the last couple of weeks. Had a Bills guy on when Dorsey got hired, talked about the relationship that Ken Dorsey and Gabe Davis had. Seems like that would be a natural fit. It depends on how much Davis is going to get in free agency. If it's around the projected number of like 12.5 million, I think the Browns will go for that. But if it gets into a bidding war with other teams, I don't think the Browns will get into that type of situation. Marquise Brown really hasn't been the guy people thought he would be coming out of Oklahoma, but because we have Elijah Moore, so I feel like that kind of is about the same type of player. Maybe they scour the trade market. Courtland Sutton could be a name. There's been murmurs out there about A.J. Brown from Philly. I do think the Browns will add a wide receiver of some sorts this offseason, whether it's free agency or a trade, but Gabe Davis is my top target for sure.
Yeah, Davis, I'm intrigued by. Courtland Sutton's a guy. I'm looking more at a big body that has a knack for getting behind the defense. Mike Williams is another name we've kicked around. That's obviously somebody that Deshaun Watson played with at Clemson in college.
Yeah, there's the connection there, but the thing about Mike Williams is he's going to be 30 years old during the season. He's coming off an ACL injury. I know it's different than what ACL injuries were like 10, 15 years ago, but he's been a guy that's been hurt from time to time throughout his career. If the money's right, there would be no problem bringing in Mike Williams because he has a track record of production in Los Angeles. But, if the money is too rich, you got to pass on that. Coming off an ACL injury like that, he's entering 30. Guys tend to not get better as they get older. I would pass on Mike Williams personally if I was the Browns because I think there's better options out there right now.
This one from the Bleacher Report. Free agents who carry the most risk and reward in the 2024 offseason. The aforementioned Marquise Brown. New setting didn't fix Brown in 2022, 2023. Wasn't exactly a talent-drenched environment. Could take off in 2024 and beyond. He'll likely be paid according to that expectation, but it's just as likely his career will continue to sputter. Chase Young, good news is he's actually healthy for the entire 2023 season and was quite productive when receiving regular playing time. Bad news, sample remains small, and he became a lot less of a factor during a run with the 49ers. Young is still just 24. Tend to forget how young Chase Young is, no pun intended. I don't know about you. I think I'd pass on both of those. There's just too many questions.
Yeah, I feel like Chase Young is going to be that free agent that gets a big contract that teams are going to regret a year from now. Very talented coming out of Ohio State. We all saw how talented he was. The injuries took their toll in Washington. Wasn't the impact guy that San Francisco thought they were getting at the trade deadline. I could see him taking a 1-year prove-it deal, honestly, if he really wanted to, and then cash it next year to prove himself to the league. And Hollywood Brown, like I mentioned, I just don't see the appeal with him. He had a great year in 2021, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns with a quarterback. A lot of people in the league still say can't throw the ball, even though he's really silenced that thought. But very up and down years in Arizona. Just hasn't been the impact guy. A lot of people thought he was going to be coming out of Oklahoma. Personally, I would pass on him as well, too.
All right, so free agency, next couple of weeks is when it will get underway. I believe it's the 11th or the 13th. I think the 13th is the opening. 11th is when you can negotiate of March. So it's just a couple of weeks away. What areas do you think the Browns target? And if they can get, is there a guy that you think, boy, if they get that, they've kind of they've had a successful free agency, if you will?
Yeah, I think they attack the wide receiver position. I don't think they go after the likes of a T. Higgins, a Mike Evans, a Michael Pittman, because I just think that'll be too expensive for the Browns. I think Gabe Davis makes sense. Maybe they go after the likes of a Darnell Mooney or a KJ Osborne, some of those guys that'll be cheap in contract, but could provide some production on this offense. I also look at the defense. Zadarius Smith's going to be a question mark. And then you look at the rest of the edge guys, like how expensive do they go into that edge room to pair somebody up with Miles? They have Okoronkwo, who'll be coming off his first year, which he was plagued with a pectoral muscle. Alex Wright showed some promise. You still have Isaiah McGuire, who was a top draft choice for them last year. How they address the edge room, I think, will be very key. Do they bring Zadarius back? Do they go for a cheaper vet to pair with Okoronkwo opposite Myles Garrett? I think that's going to be an interesting situation as we go through free agency.
Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast and I are going to step aside to quick timeout. Other side of the break, Jackson has done a mock draft. We'll take a look at some of the round 2 and 3 picks that he has mocked to the Browns. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
All right, everybody. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $1 Lady Luck 5X, because the pink really pops like my safety vest. Plus $1,000 grand prize really hammers it home for me.
And this $2 10X really nails it for me. $2 for a shot at 10 grand? That's rock solid.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're built for fun.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast. Steve Palazzolo with who he thinks the Browns might look at. This from the PFF NFL show.
I'm a big Xavier Worthy fan from Texas for what he's worth. Like at pick 55,
yeah,
could be good for
really
Xavier
like
Worthy as a deep threat. He's our friend Brett Coleman has been putting receiver comps out there, and some of the comp season is hilarious because I'm not going to get off the.
Who's Worthy's?
He gave someone else Mike Wallace.
Yeah, everyone's using.
It was
Mike
like
Wallace
Malik
comp.
Neighbors or something like that, and I was just like, "That's drunk. I don't like it. I don't like it." But again, like I don't like to trash comps because sometimes there's like one thing that a guy does that reminds you.
Yeah,
Xavier Worthy
context for what the comp is.
Right. So Mike Wallace is my Xavier Worthy comp because I'm seeing a deep speed, long leg, deep speed guy who body catches. And I don't know if he's going to be a full route tree type of guy, but there's value just letting this dude run post and goes and over routes and go get him, right? I think Xavier Worthy could be that guy. I have a Mike Wallace comp in every draft. Will Fuller was a Mike Wallace comp, right? Yeah. So then you add it to your comp mix and you could have a Will Fuller comp if they're a little bit shorter. But to me, that's what Worthy can be. And if Cooper is still there and is your high volume guy and Xavier Worthy's your take the top off the defense guy, I think that could work really well for the Browns.
So, Jackson, just your thoughts on Xavier Worthy. I'm not crazy about taking Mike Wallace in the second round that high, but your thoughts about Xavier Worthy?
Well, if we get Pittsburgh Mike Wallace, I think that's a fair comp. If we get Miami Mike Wallace, not a good comp. But I really like Xavier Worthy. If he tests the way I think he's going to next week, Dave, he won't make it to pick 55. There's no way a wide receiver like him with his speed, his explosive playmaking ability, there's no way he's making it to 55 for the Browns, unfortunately. But I really like him. I agree with Steve from PFF. I think he would be a great fit alongside Amari Cooper in this offense as someone that can, take the top off of defense. If Deshaun can get back to form, throwing those deep balls down the field to Worthy, it would be a nice 1-2 punch at wide receiver, something the Browns haven't had in a long time. But if Worthy tests like I think he will next week in Indy, he won't even sniff the Browns pick, unfortunately.
All right, so you've done a mock draft, so we'll set this up. You had the Browns making 2 trades. So they sent Greg Newsome to the Lions for one of the Lions' 3rd picks, 73 overall, and then the Browns trade back from 55 with the 49ers to get 64 and 98. So the end result, you give up Greg Newsome, you end up with 4 picks in the top 100, 64, 73, 86, 98. And then you have the Browns at 64 taking a wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall from Florida. What do you like about Pearsall?
Yeah, he had a really impressive week at the Senior Bowl, showing off his athleticism, his ability to separate off a cornerback, something that, some scouting reports said that he wasn't the best at, but watching the one-on-one battles, he had a pretty good week in Mobile. I think that helped his case for sure. Good size at 6'1". Interested to see how he tests next week at the Combine, to see if it matches up what I've watched on film. But I do like him. I think he'd be a nice option if the Browns stay at 55 or if they peel back a little bit into the late 2nd round, early 3rd round.
You had him trading Greg Newsome. Obviously, it's because you can't. You got Denzel Ward. You're going to have to pay Martin Emerson. You're going to have to pay Greg Newsome. You got too many outside corners that are going to want lots of money.
Yeah, I mean that's the unfortunate thing. You'd love to keep everybody in an ideal world. I like Greg Newsome. I think he is a talented corner in this league. A lot of people criticized him after the playoff game. He had a bad playoff game, but one game doesn't define a player. I think he has a spot in this league, and like you said, you can't pay everybody. His 5th-year option, obviously, the deadline is in May. It's worth $12 million. I think the Browns move on. Maybe they pick it up and then move him. But I think they try to trade him this offseason, get some draft capital back. I know a lot of people think we could get a late 1 just because you look at the draft simulator and think you can get a late 1. This is how it works out. I think you get a day 2 pick for Newsome, which I think will still be good value, and then you can flip that into a nice prospect of some sorts.
At 73 in the 3rd round, one of those picks, actually the pick you got for Greg Newsome, you haven't taken an edge rusher, Javon Solomon from Troy. Tell me what you like about Solomon.
Yeah, he's a good explosive pass rusher. He is a bit undersized. He's like 6'2", 240 pounds, so he might not be an ideal fit, hypothetically, for this Browns defense, but with how explosive he is as a pass rusher, you line him up opposite Miles, or you kick Miles inside and you use him in a package with Okoronkwo and take your pick of defensive tackle. I think it could cause some nightmares up front for opposing offensive lines. Solomon was a great edge, and Troy racked up a lot of pressures and sacks. He could be a good fit, but the size would be a concern, I think, for some, because we're used to these massive defensive ends in Jim Schwartz's scheme.
All right, another 3rd-round pick at 86. Christian Mahogany, a guard from Boston College. And again, keep in mind, you've got both Teller and Bitonio kind of getting up there in age, and you know how that goes with offensive linemen. They take a beating out on the field.
Yeah, I haven't watched Mahogany too much yet, but he graded out really well at Boston College. But you mentioned it, Bitonio's getting older. Teller, the guaranteed money's up. I wouldn't be so shocked if they moved him this offseason in a trade, potentially, to upgrade another position in need. But they do need to start looking at the future of this offensive line, not at just the interior, but the tackles as well, with Jed Wills coming up on his last season, Jack Conklin, his last season of guaranteed money. So the offensive line isn't a position group that a lot of people are focusing on this offseason, but I really think Browns fans should be.
All right, before I let you go, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm curious. In the 6th round of this mock draft, you had the Browns taking Frank Gore Jr. From Southern Mississippi. It is the son of the aforementioned Frank Gore. What do you see from Frank Gore Jr. and what do you like about him?
He's a really underlooked back in this draft class. You dive into his advanced metrics. 824 of his 1,119 yards last year, Dave, came after contact, which means he took the first hit, and then he made big plays after that. He reminds me slightly, I'm going to say slightly, of a Nick Chubb. And we know how good Frank Gore was during his time with the San Francisco 49ers. I'm not saying his son's going to be like that, but he put up some incredible numbers in Southern Mississippi. I think he's getting underlooked. I think it will depend on the fit, but if you get him on day 3 of the draft, and we've seen some day 3 running backs turn into some pretty good running backs in this league, I think Frank Gore could definitely be one of those guys.
Jackson,
Frank Gore Jr.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, it's intriguing. If you're telling me he's a little bit like Nick Chubb, I think I want to see more of that from a 6th-round pick without question. Jackson McCurry, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jackson.
Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure.
Jackson McCurry, make sure you check him out, the Dawgland podcast. Really interesting stuff there with that mock draft. You can check that out as well. That was done for Dogs by Nature. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.